All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are breaking down one of the biggest AI releases of the year, and that's Alibaba's massive new model, Qwen3-Max. This isn't just another update, it's a huge move that's really shaking things up on the global AI stage. So let's get into what makes this thing such a big deal.
So think about this for a second. For the longest time, the AI race has felt, well, pretty predictable, right? It's always been about OpenAI and Google, like a constant battle between those two giants. It's felt like a classic two-horse race. But what if I told you that's not the full story anymore?
Yeah, exactly. That established order is getting a serious shakeup. Alibaba just dropped Qs13 Max. And let me tell you, this isn't just some small update. It's a massive statement. It's them planting a flag and saying, hey, there's a new player in town and we're here to compete at the absolute top level.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get to know this new challenger and the tech behind it. Then we'll look at a performance showdown, see how it's actually being used, and wrap things up by looking at the much bigger geopolitical picture here. All right, first up, let's meet this new challenger. So what exactly is Qwen3-Max? What's going on under the hood that's making everyone pay attention? Okay, the number that's just grabbing all the headlines? 1 trillion parameters, and that's over 1 trillion actually. Now, if you're not deep in the weeds, parameters are basically the knobs and dials the AI uses to learn. And to put this into perspective, just a few years back, a massive model had maybe a few hundred billion. So yeah, we're talking about a completely different league here. And that incredible scale is built on a couple of truly mind-blowing numbers. First off, the training data. 36 trillion tokens. That is just an unbelievable amount of text and data to learn from. Then there's the context window. We're talking about 1 million words. 1 million. That means it can process and remember the equivalent of several full-length novels in a single go. For complex problems, that's an absolute game changer. So you might be wondering, how on earth does a model with 1 trillion parameters not just melt to supercomputer? Well, the secret sauce is in its architecture, something called a mixture of experts, or MOE for short. Look, instead of one single giant brain trying to do everything, picture it more like a highly specialized team. You've got different experts, and a really smart router looks at your problem and sends it to the best expert for that specific job. So you get the raw power of 1 trillion parameters, but you only light up the ones you need for any given task. It's a super clever way to get that massive scale without the insane computational cost. Okay, so 1 trillion parameters, mixture of experts? That all sounds super impressive on paper. But the real question is, how does it actually perform in the wild? Let's get into the performance showdown and see how the claims actually stack up. All right, so if you look at Alibaba's own numbers, they're phenomenal. On a test for graduate-level reasoning called Super GPQA, it's beating out heavy hitters like Claude 3 Opus. For advanced math, it's pulling an impressive 81.6. And maybe most importantly, in head-to-head tests where humans pick the best answer, it's ranking in the top 3 globally, supposedly going toe-to-toe with the very best from OpenAI. I mean, these are some seriously bold claims. But you knew there was a but, right? As soon as these incredible numbers came out, the developer community chimed in with a very healthy dose of skepticism. And this quote from a user on Reddit kind of says it all. It's called benchmaxing, everybody does it. So what in the world is benchmaxing? Basically, it means you can kind of teach to the test. Vendor-provided benchmarks are super useful as a starting point, don't get me wrong, but they're not the whole story. The real gold standard is when independent third-party researchers can test these things head-to-head on a whole bunch of different tasks. So, until that happens, we should probably treat these amazing numbers as a really promising sign, but maybe not the final definitive word just yet. Okay, so enough about benchmarks for a minute. How does this thing actually go from a cool piece of tech to something that people can use? Let's take a look at how developers and businesses can get their hands on Qwen3-Max. Well, for developers, the good news is that Alibaba made this pretty easy. You can access it through an API, and they smartly made it compatible with OpenAI standards, which means it's way easier for people to switch over or experiment. It's also baked right into Alibaba Cloud's Model Studio, so if you're already in their ecosystem, it's a no-brainer. The only catch? They're rolling it out in phases, and big enterprise customers are at the front of the line. And that rollout plan really tells you who they're targeting first. Big companies. And the use cases make perfect sense for them. We're talking about things like way smarter search for all those internal company documents, or building customer support bots that are actually helpful. A huge one is something called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is a fancy way of saying the AI can securely use a company's own private data to answer questions. And naturally, it's also a beast at generating code to help developers work faster.
Of course, all this power isn't free. The pricing is tiered, and it's all based on how much context you feed it. For smaller tasks, you're looking at about $1.20 for input and $6 for output per million tokens. But as you start using more and more of that giant million-word context window, the price goes up. It's a pretty standard way to encourage people to be efficient with how they use the model. Okay, so let's pull the camera back a bit. Let's zoom way out. Because the fact that a model this powerful is coming from a non-Western company, well, that has huge implications. This stops being just a tech story and starts becoming a major geopolitical story. I mean, just look at this timeline. It really shows you how fast things are moving. Back in 2020, GPT-3 came out with 175 billion parameters, and we all thought that was just mind-boggling. Fast forward just a few years, and boom, we are squarely in the trillion parameter era. Qwen3-Max isn't some weird outlier. It's just the latest stop on this runaway train of exponential growth that's completely changing the game.
And a trend this big, this global, starts raising some really tough questions for governments everywhere. For starters, where does the data live? Suddenly, customers in Asia have a world-class option right in their backyard with Alibaba Cloud, which is a huge deal for data residency laws. That immediately makes you think about things like technology export controls. How do you regulate access to something this powerful across borders? It also puts way more pressure on everyone to agree on safety standards and to be transparent about how these things are tested. What this all really means is that the AI race is now truly multipolar, and while that could seriously speed up innovation, it also makes the job of regulating it all a whole lot harder. Which brings us to the big final question. As AI just keeps getting more and more powerful, who's really going to be in the driver's seat? The innovators who are building these incredible tools, or the regulators who are trying to keep everything on the rails? We're at a really fascinating crossroads right now, and the launch of Qwen3-Max just cranked up the urgency on that question big time. Thanks for tuning in.